Hey everyone, Will here from Pengineer 3D, your best place to get the most innovative accessories for the fountain pen world. If you know about us, you probably are familiar with our ink sample roulette system that provides a fun and stable system for both storing your ink samples and not throwing them in a bag in the corner of your drawer, but also filling your pen with the ink samples on a nice, stable base so you don't have to worry about it tipping over and spilling everywhere. Of course, that then led into the fountain pen roulette system, which is very similar. Everything is felt lined, so your pens have a nice home that's cozy for them, won't get scratched up or anything like that. But you can store them on your shelf in this great looking storage system. Each one holds 7, or you can put them on your desk and just take them out to write as you need. It's kind of nice to have the options. Today I would like to show you the story of how we developed our latest product, the InkStation. This is a great way to stably and securely fill your fountain pens when the bottle or ink samples are getting low. Depending on the bottle, that could be halfway down, a third of the way down, a quarter of the way down. Ink samples are about halfway down. It's harder to fill the pens because you just can't get the nib far enough down into it. It's usable for just about every single ink bottle that you can throw at it. So today I want to show you how we got from the initial prototype to the final product. Let's begin the story. So any product that comes out has to go through an ideation phase. What this means is coming up with what a need is. What is the problem that needs to be solved? And with this, obviously, it comes down to filling. Filling your fountain pen when the ink gets low, whether it's in an ink sample or a bottle. Depending on how the bottle is designed, it can be harder early on or at the very last drop. But either way, you need to be able to make sure you can get all that ink out without worrying about it spilling. And how do you do that when you have to angle the bottle in to get, to have the level of ink relatively raised up? It's not easy to do that by itself. So I wanted to come up with a way of solving that problem. And that's where this was born. Essentially, I have a very secure system with the ink sample roulette. This is where I started at. I have my double and triple shot bases as well if you have multiple that you can put into them and carry them together, store them together, however you want to do it. So I kind of used that as a baseline and thought, well, what if we angle that up? If we do that, we can have a fairly safe home for your ink samples, for your bottles, to be able to fill up. But the problem with that is that I thought basically as a bottle gets more tipped over, if we don't have a base in front of it, the whole thing might tip over. So that's where this extension came out of. So we have 2 things so far. One is the angle to fill in, and then of course now we have an extension. Well, what are we going to do with this extension? It's a waste of space. Well, what if we have a way of wiping the nib when you're done filling? So let's get a little sponge here. These are actually just soldering iron sponges that I had laying around. I was like, okay, well, I could use that. That's about the right size that I need. It doesn't add too much length, but enough to be stable. It fits within the width, no problem. You can put just a little bit of water in here and it'll stay wet for a couple of days. It's really, really nice. Great. Okay, so here is the initial concept. I posted it on Instagram, thought, hey, what do you guys think? Should I continue? The reaction was positive and said, go for it. So I continued on the development. I first tried using it, and I very quickly realized this isn't as safe as I thought it would be. So I had to come up with a solution. And that's where all of these came into play. My first thought, incorrectly, was that this front wall here needs to be taller. My thinking was that way it could kind of prevent the rocking motion, because this is very low as it is. If I could prevent this from rocking forward, that might help make it secure. So I created prototype number 2. I have a deeper wall here, thinking if that can prevent it from tipping over, that's all that would be needed. Probably didn't make it quite deep enough, but it's right along there. There's not much extra room for this to move. And no good. That doesn't quite work. I need something to prevent I need something to catch it is what I was thinking next on the back. So enter in the next several prototypes where I came up with a lip in here to basically catch it on the end. This came with some failures that just did not work. So a couple prototypes later, I have this one here. I decided to put in some cutouts so I can actually see what's going on and try and finagle it in. Still not going in. But I was realizing I can't even get these in. So I realized I need to have a step in here so that this can go in flat and then tip over. So you go in flat here, and now it goes in, and I can, in theory, hopefully get it in there. That was not a very smooth system, is it? So some more trial and error, and we eventually get to this system here. You can watch how this goes in, and it kind of rocks in place, just like that. And now this is pretty stable. Put your ink samples back on. It spins. This works. This actually does work. So now that I'm done with this prototyping, I have the geometries I'm happy with. Let's make the full thing. Let's try it out. And so I was originally designing this with the intent of designing something to hold the bottles later on, but first starting out with the ink sample roulette system because I wanted it to be compatible with my previous products. Of course, having a family of products that works together is very important. It just is a nice thing to have. So in comes my first one. Basically, here we go. We enter that in there. It's a little kind of funny because I maintained this groove here to lock in place with the roulette system base. So that is in there. That's nice and stable. Get in there just like that. Concept works. Put the sponge in there and you are golden, so to speak, right? So let's start creating the bottle holder. This is an interesting challenge because there are so many different sizes and shapes of bottles. It's impossible to make up one simple solution, but I thought I would do my best to see if I can at least attempt it. And this is the result of that. I had one side for square or rectangular side bottles and another side for two different diameter round bottles. However, you can quickly see this is very limiting in size. Well, this one fit, this barely perfectly fits. Private Reserve does not fit. This Parker does not fit. Edelstein does not fit. This is a hard problem. Additionally, with this wall back here, the idea was you can have it in either orientation, but the wall in the back prevents you from being able to insert it enough. Back to the drawing board. So after being unhappy with how this concept really just did not work, it's not going to work for most of the bottles out there, so I needed to pivot, come up with a new concept. So then I came up with this idea right here, which is that the bottle would rest along these edges, whether it's curved or square, it just would fall into place. And then you would have a little backer to kind of hold it on the back. Just like that. So you have, say, a bottle like this, put that into place, and there you go. It kind of holds it into place. This one is a little bit loose, but it was an initial concept that kind of worked. You could then slide it in here, wiggle it in, and so there you go. A relatively stable place. Obviously, you don't want to try too hard pushing it, but it kind of ruled that this is maybe a good concept, a good path to go down. So I continue going down this path. So how this one works is you can see the base is the same size as the ink sample holder or pen roulette system, but then I kind of raised up a platform on there to build the track that this guy would then slide into. So I had this on my desk for a long time, actually, and I had it as a pen holder with these pens here. Just like that. Fits in. It's actually a pretty nice writing experience. Keep your sponge there. So if you have a dry pen, a hard starting pen, you can take your pen out here and just wet it with a sponge. And then it'll start working again. It's kind of nice, right? So I had that in here for a while. It's fun. It still spins. And this is probably a couple weeks go by. I'm using it on my desk, and I'm just sort of thinking about if there's anything else I could do to change it to make it better. And I realized there's one kind of wonky system about it if you're using it with the fountain pen roulette system or with the ink sample roulette system, which is you can't insert it with the wheel part. You can only insert it with the base to get it to fit in. And I was like, the users aren't going to like that. If I were to try and put this in like this, I can't put it in. I have to lift this up kind of finagle that into place, and then it works. I didn't like that. Now, because I didn't like that rocking motion, I came up with a new design, a new theory that ultimately is where I went with. And that is having it load from the back.
Wow.
You still have a lip on the sides here that will hold it in place. So if you have ink sample roulette, for example, you can just slide that in and that will be nice and secure. That's not going anywhere. Previously, the lip was around the back here and not on the sides. Now it's on the sides. You can easily just slide this in. This one was a little bit tight, so that had to be modified later on. So then I tried putting in, this guy. Did not work. The top part is too wide. So I came up with Gen 2 of that idea. I added some nice little features here to it, but ultimately the big change was having the bottle back be 2 sizes. So if you have a small bottle, you put it in that way. If you have a big bottle, you put it in that way. And you have some extension so you can go, from a lot of different sizes. For example, if you have a Monteverde bottle, you can just rest that in place and slide it there in small mode. It sticks out in the back, that's fine. But if you do have a big bottle, like this one here, you can extend it out and that fits in. Just barely though. This one was exact same footprint as basically everything else. The ink sample roulette system, fountain pen roulette system, you can see that circle is the exact same size. And that's where the limiting feature of how big I could fit a bottle in. I thought that could be better. So let's put this into the InkStation base and put it in. You have it in there. However, with this being round, this can easily just turn on you. Depending on the bottle, that may or may not be a bigger issue. Right now with this big Parker bottle, the back kind of prevents it from rotating. But if you had a smaller bottle, say even this one here, it's still going to turn on you. Monteverde bottle or anything smaller where this fits within the circle, this can just rotate around. That's not a good stable solution. And also, I didn't really like this sort of squircle design, so I decided to update the design a little bit. Here's the next version of the InkStation base. You can see I rounded the back of it. I think it looks much nicer. And then I added some writing to it. Pengineer 3D InkStation. Hey, I like that. But I also kind of made the sidewall a little bit taller so things can slide in a little bit easier, but still be stable. For the bottle holder, the big change that I did from the previous version to this one is I made it a little bit longer. And this prevents it from rotating. So this is not going anywhere, just a few degrees. That got improved later on, but you can see with it being longer and not circular, you don't have to worry about your bottle spinning in place. Additionally, that extra length buys you some more size capabilities with really big bottles and say big bottle mode back here. So say you have a bottle of Iroshizuku. Now obviously these ones do have a point which does help a lot obviously, but you could in theory fit that in like that. That's pretty impressive I think, because if you can fit this in, you can fit in just about any bottle. And I'm thinking this is looking pretty good. This is coming along pretty well. But there's still some little things here and there that I think could probably be improved. And I thought basically this is the final version, so I'm gonna go back to my favorite blue. And here we go, the next version. A little bit tighter, a little bit better fitting, a little bit more nip and tuck. That looks pretty good, but still wasn't quite happy. It didn't have these little visual cue notches that I put along the base here on the V2 roulette systems. So I wanted to add that in, maybe make this a little bit of a tighter fit. So I came up with this version. Right here, you can see I added those little notches there. Printed this guy in the nice blue. Pretty happy with how that looks. Slides in and out, it's nice. There's a little bit of friction, which is pretty nice because it helps keep a bottle secure. Slide that into place and you're pretty good to go, right? I'm not happy with this at this point. So what can I do? Because this is still sort of like that's kind of open there. Yeah, you got the 2 points there, which is important to keep it stable. But could there be a better way of doing it? What happens if you have a rectangular bottle like Edelstein? You know, you basically would slot it into here, and that's not very good. It doesn't fit correctly in there. If I go in small bottle mode, it's not very good. So what I have to do this, you know, this number, that's not gonna work. So I need this to be even more flexible. And that's when the final version comes into play. At this one, I decided to put the foam on. Of course, you're gonna have the nice stable foam base, so it's not sliding on you. And of course, this is also gonna have a stable base for you, so if it won't slide on you on your desk if you just want to use it on your desktop as well to help fill, you know, a bottle. But the real secret sauce I added to here is this. This spins to allow for different shapes, sizes, and types of bottles. Starting out with the small ones. In small mode, and this does turn freely, you can fit an ink sample in there nice and tight. No problem, no worries about that locking out. If you have a square bottle, just turn it, put it in the square bottle. If you have a round bottle, turn it, now it hugs around the round bottle. And if you have a rectangular bottle like this, you go to the flat surface. You got a nice secure fit along the side wall here. If it's on the walls here. So you got 3 walls of contact to be a nice, stable filling system. Look at that. And you got the ink tilted over, so you get, you know, a more complete depth. Of course, it still fits with ink sample roulette if you have that, no problem. And of course, it also fits in fountain pen roulette if you have that, no problem at all. You still have your sponge, keep it wet, keep it moist, and you can wipe off your nib when you're done cleaning, or if you have a hard starting pen, you got nice wet surface there for a couple days. So there you go, the final product. I also changed how these kind of grooves looked. I just thought it looked a little bit better this way. Matches more with how these are down here. So that is the story of product development, of how we got from the initial concept to the final ink station. I hope you enjoyed this. This will be available on Pengineer3D.com. Go there right now to order, and you know it comes in your favorite colors as well. Every color that we make, you can get this in. So whatever you want, you got it. So thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this little story, and I hope you like this product. So go to Pengineer3D.com to get yours today. Thank you. Bye. the ink station. The idea is to angle your ink samples or bottles or whatever it is, fill it up with your pen while providing a fairly stable so I came up with this as a solution to all those problems of trying to get all that ink out of your so I came up with the ink station to basically solve all these issues. How do you get the last, say, quarter or third, half, maybe even depending on the bottle, of ink out of it safely and not worry about tipping over and spilling? What this does is it obviously provides a nice angle here. And we settle on about 30 degrees as a good compromise to be able to, say, take off, to be able to fill your pen. So the idea is you put your pen in here, it's fairly stable, you get the angle, and then at the end, you have the sponge here, you can wipe off the nib of any excess ink. Pretty nice idea. So this was the very first concept. I actually posted this on my Instagram page, link down below if you're interested in following me there. However, this one didn't quite work out very well because as you can see, this is kind of tippy. So how do I get from this initial concept to the final product? This is the story I would like to tell to you guys today. The first step is, of course, the ideation process. This is when you come up with a problem you want to solve and how you're going to do that. So it can be, problems can come from anywhere, from anyone, from your own life, from things that you observe. And then you have to think of how can I solve that? How can I do something better? All these different things depending on what you're trying to achieve. For this specific example, what I wanted to achieve for this product, what I wanted to solve is what I wanted to solve was what happens when a bottle of ink gets too low to be able to put your fountain pen nib in deep enough to be able to get the ink. Normally what you have to do is very carefully kind of tilt it to one side like that, so where you can see you kind of basically get some extra depth from the ink using the corner here. But it's not very stable, you're kind of doing it, trying to use, but to do that you really need 3 hands or a way of tilting it. And this is a round bottle, there's some square ones, but either way, tilting it, just trying to have it on its edge like that, not very safe and secure. So that's where this came in.